You're a British spy. Do you have a name?
My name's Bond.
By the turn of the century, the James Bond IP had proved itself as one of the most exciting and profitable franchises on the planet. And just like with any recognizable and marketable brand, production companies were starting to prey on its lucrative licensing potential. Of course, I'm talking about video games. Hold on. Let's take it back 3 years just for a second. Rare's GoldenEye had set an exceedingly high bar to reach when it launched on the Nintendo 64 back in '97, and had basically become a cultural phenomenon shortly after its release, which is what led EA Games, having seen how much potential remained yet untapped within the 007 brand, to aggressively outbid Nintendo for the licensing rights to make video games based on the property for the foreseeable future, leaving both Rare and Nintendo behind. This then led straight into the tumultuous development cycle of GoldenEye's 007 follow-up game, Tomorrow Never Dies, for the Sony PlayStation. A story I've already talked about in my video on that game that you should consider checking out if you're interested, along with my video on GoldenEye as well, assuming you haven't seen either or both of those already. Tomorrow Never Dies ended up taking 2 years to complete due to a series of different developmental issues, including a total overhaul to convert the game from its original concept of a soft sequel to the film it was based on into a direct adaptation of it, which resulted in a multitude of delays and a plethora of content being cut from the final release. The game did manage to sell reasonably well, but fell short of expectations both critically and financially, which left the studio who made it, Black Ops Entertainment, feeling dissatisfied with a compromised product, and EA Games unhappy with the sales figures. But Black Ops Entertainment wasn't finished just yet. In fact, they were already itching at their opportunity to make a comeback, and EA was quick to greenlight their second chance to do so by handing them the licensing rights to adapt the latest Bond film, The World Is Not Enough. And then they were given roughly 1 year with which to do so.
I suppose we all have to pay the piper sometime.
So the crew got together and immediately began working on their brand new Bond endeavor by improving the engine they had already developed previously for their Tomorrow Never Dies game. I think you can tell when you look at it too, since although The World Is Not Enough does admittedly look better, it also still looks very similar to the style of its predecessor. Except, as you can also see, this time it's all in first person. Gone is the awkward third-person perspective, and in its place, a new first-person viewpoint designed to bring the series closer to the kind of immersion GoldenEye had perfected just 3 years earlier. Producer Joel Wade described the change as a way to, quote, pull the player deeper into Bond's world, end quote, making every mission feel more personal and intense. To make it work, the team had to rewrite massive portions of their old engine, adding new animations, new sound effects, and entirely new scripted sequences. The targeting system was rebuilt, draw distances were extended, and for the first time, every enemy in the game was fully motion captured with over 30 distinct movement sets. In fact, Black Ops even hired Keanu Reeves' stunt double from The Matrix to handle the acrobatics, so that's pretty cool. The studio had originally planned to include a multiplayer mode too, but much like with their previous entry, the mode was once again cut before release as they believed splitting focus would hurt the single-player mode. And after Tomorrow Never Dies, they couldn't really afford another misstep. The World Is Not Enough for the PS1 eventually hit store shelves on November 7th in the year 2000, just 1 year after both the film it was adapting and its own predecessor game had previously released. Once again, the critics were mixed on their opinions of the adaptation, but the game did quietly accumulate an audience as it went on to sell nearly 1.5 million copies worldwide, even earning a gold sales award in the UK for moving more than 200,000 units. For Black Ops Entertainment, the game's success, regardless of its rough-around-the-edges quality, was proof of their capabilities, and for EA Games, it was a gambit that seemed to be paying off. Although, unlike last time, EA had made sure to hedge their bets and not stake it all on Black Ops Entertainment alone. Okay, so if you remember playing The World Is Not Enough as a kid and none of this is looking at all familiar to you, leaving you confused as to why, well then you probably played it on the N64.
Surprised?
See, unlike the last game, The World Is Not Enough wasn't just released on the PS1. EA was going all in this time around, and as such had commissioned 4 different teams to develop 4 different, completely unique versions of The World Is Not Enough. Of course, there was the one for the PlayStation that we just talked about, but there was also a version in development for the Nintendo 64, the Game Boy Color, and even one intended for release on both the PC and the hotly anticipated PlayStation 2, although that version ended up being soft canceled and reworked into a different Bond game entirely. Don't worry, we'll get there. We're not to that one yet. I need to really emphasize though that these other versions weren't just ports, but rather totally separate games made on completely different engines with all original assets across each iteration. Same title, same movie, but 3 totally different games. No, seriously, outside of the main menu style, most of the level names, and a few icon assets here and there are nearly no commonalities between these 3 versions. They're all just straight up different experiences start to finish. I mean, in regards to the Game Boy Color, that's a given, but even I wasn't fully aware of just how different the PS1 and N64 versions were going to be before playing them for this video. You see, while EA had Black Ops Entertainment busy with their version of The World Is Not Enough for the PlayStation, a very different team was working on their own version of Bond, one that would take shape on the Nintendo 64. Development of this iteration was handled by Eurocom, a UK studio with a growing reputation for technical excellence. EA had just formed a partnership with MGM in 1998 to produce Bond titles, and Eurocom was already deep into building a brand new first-person engine, one designed to scale for the upcoming 6th generation of consoles like the GameCube or PS2. When EA saw what they were working on, a collaboration quickly began. Eurocom's goal was ambitious, to create the fastest first-person shooter ever released on the Nintendo 64. Their new engine was tailor-made to squeeze every ounce of power out of the console, delivering longer draw distances, dynamic lighting, fog effects, and explosive particle systems, all without tanking the frame rate. The game even supported, and honestly even kind of required, the expansion pack, giving players sharper visuals and smoother performance overall. According to the developers, they pushed the system so far that they, quote, didn't think they could push it much more than they have, end quote. For Eurocom, this wasn't just another project, it was their final Nintendo 64 game, and they wanted it to be a proper send-off. To help recreate the world of The World Is Not Enough faithfully, MGM supplied the team with original concept art, blueprints, and reference photos from the movie sets. Much like its PS1 counterpart, this game follows the film's basic story, but Eurocom took creative liberties to enhance the pacing and level design. Some sequences, like a London Underground mission where Bond rescues hostages, were brand new, while others, such as the iconic boat chase, had to be cut entirely due to cartridge limitations. Producer Bill Beecham later explained that adding vehicles would have required a completely separate engine, one that might have compromised the core experience. Instead, Eurocom focused on refining the gunplay, enemy AI, and mission variety. The characters' faces were digitized directly from the film's actors, but the voice performances came from sound-alike actors. Oh, except for John Cleese, who did reprise his role as R in the PS1 version.
So, why do I even bother?
It's funny that everyone at the time just kind of accepted that Cleese's character's name actually was R just because of a single joke line in the film.
If you're Q, does that make him R?
By the middle of the year 2000, The World Is Not Enough for the Nintendo 64 was about 3/4 complete and made its public debut at E3 in Los Angeles. The final game shipped just a few months later on October 17, 2000. Released on a 32MB cartridge, it featured over 500 lines of compressed dialogue, a feat that vastly overshadowed GoldenEye's 0 lines of dialogue, sleek presentation, and a level of technical polish that few Nintendo 64 shooters could even come close to matching. For Eurocom, it wasn't just another licensed title, it was their swan song for an entire era of hardware. So as I was playing through these games and kind of working it out in my head how I wanted to go about covering each respective campaign, I came up with a kind of level progression idea for how to handle it. Although there are an uneven number of available missions across the 3 games, with the N64 version boasting the most at a very solid 14 levels, the PS1 version clocking in at 11 and the Game Boy Color version only having 8, the progression is all pretty much the same across each game. So I figured what I'd do is start with the PS1 version of the game, use that as a base, and then compare and contrast each individual level with its N64 counterpart as we go. I'll just tackle the levels that don't have direct counterparts as we get to them, but for the most part the 2 games do share a progression. Look, they even have the same level names too, in spite of the actual levels themselves being completely different. Oh, and I guess we'll check in on the Game Boy Color version developed by 2N Productions every now and then just to show you what that looks like where relevant. So let's kick things off by spinning up the disc release of The World Is Not Enough for the Sony PlayStation. But really quickly before we do that, I'd like to take a minute to ask that if you're enjoying the video so far, you consider hitting that like button, subscribing to the channel, and of course, leaving a comment with your own thoughts on on these games. These three things matter so much in trying to survive in the YouTube algorithm, which feels like a constant uphill battle these days. Also, if you're interested in hearing my thoughts on the Bond films that go along with the games, you should consider becoming either a channel member or signing up over on my Patreon, where you'll have access to my film reviews of the Bond movies. I've done 3 so far as of this video in the form of GoldenEye, Tomorrow Never Dies, and of course The World Is Not Enough, with plenty more to go. So if you're wanting more Bond content from me, along with other exclusive content like book reviews and production reports, you'll find all relevant links in the description below. Oh, and one last thing, I just dropped my channel motto t-shirt on my merch site in a deathcore font. Whatever you're doing, be it video games, fitness, food, or media, my motto is to ensure you derive something from it that grows you as a person, i.e., make it matter. So rep that to remind you to always make it matter. But that's my tidbit here, so let's get back to Bond.
Construction's not exactly my, speciality.
Quite the opposite, in fact.
So one of the first things I want to note is that both main versions share extremely similar menu screens, so much to the point where I was wondering if the two teams were actually sharing a game design document between them. I mean, I can't prove that, but how cool would it be if these games were the actual result of 2 different teams trying to build a game based off of the same exact game design document? How interesting would that be? I don't know if that's really the case here, but I'm just going to say that you should keep that possibility in mind is all. Before each level, we're shown a briefing screen not too dissimilar to the ones we got in GoldenEye, with different characters chiming in with insights on your mission. Although R is typically the only one with anything actually useful to say, and even then only sometimes. Moneypenny's character seems to only ever be used as a way of trying to make a sex joke about something and little else.
James, don't mix business with pleasure. Remember, this is a shadow operation. Shadows stay in front or behind, never on top.
Shadows stay in front or behind, never on top.
Going into the first mission, we're put straight into Bond's perspective as we wander this large bank lobby, and I've got to say this looks spectacular for a PS1 game. Like, seriously, the detail work on the models and textures in this game is genuinely some of the best I've seen on the console as a whole, and if the game was less frustrating to play, it probably would be given more credit for what it pulled off here visually. Although I do need to clarify that I'm playing this on an emulator with everything upscaled, so of course it wouldn't have looked this good back in 2000 when it dropped. Something I think seems to go under-discussed about both main versions of this game are how much they both try to flirt with being an immersive sim. This version more so than the N64 one, but still, both do feature a few M-Sim-like mechanics here and there that help make the game so much more fun to me. This game wants you to feel like you are a 00 agent on a mission. So we use our disruptor pin gadget to bypass a metal detector and avoid having to turn over our firearms, and then make our way to the elevators. Just like the last 2 Bond games we talked about, this one also utilizes an in-world item for Bond's menu in the form of his Motorola phone. Okay, look, if it gave them more money to play with in the game's production and resulted in paying the employees better, then I'm all for a little bit of tasteful product placement. The phone is also used to give the player these little optional calls from MI6 intended to help the player with instruction on what to do next, although I think these were a complete waste of time almost every time. The idea is actually good, and the game did have several sections where this mechanic could have popped up to guide the player through the game's levels if they were getting lost. Like, the game could have used this feature in a decent way, since I did have to look up what to do once or twice in places where this feature could have resolved the issue, but they didn't really use it for that. A prime example is me not knowing what to do with this thermos for like 5 minutes because I couldn't interact with it despite the prompt being there. You're actually supposed to go to your inventory menu, equip the fingerprint scanner, use it on the thermos, and then take it to the door to LaChase's office and use it again. Now, this isn't one of the things I had to look up, as I was able to figure it out pretty quickly, but it is a good example of a time when the game could have seen how long the player was lingering and then called in to guide the player to consider checking their inventory. Metal Gear Solid did this very well actually with its codec calls. Now, if you don't want it to do that because it removes the agency of the player figuring it out on their own, then I totally get that and fully support it even. Figuring out the game's features is fun for me, and I like it. But if that's the case, then they should have removed the little MI6 calls altogether, because they serve no purpose here and their only conceivable use would be to guide the player if they seem lost. Anyway, once we access the office, we're shown a quick in-engine cutscene replicating the opening of the movie itself. Now, this game doesn't have very many in-engine sequences like this because it tends to just use clips from the movie in place of its cutscenes, kind of like Tomorrow Never Dies did, but this time it actually works because the film's segments fit snugly between missions. So Bond grabs the briefcase and busts out of the window for his escape. That's it for this mission on the PS1 version of the game. But what about the N64 version? So right away, this version starts off with a rather impressive in-engine cutscene along with full voice acting even in the missions themselves. Looking at the visuals, I don't think it looks as good as its PS1 counterpart, although it does still look excellent for an N64 game. Again, easily one of the best looking N64 games I think I've ever seen. So things play out a little bit differently here despite opening on the same level idea. Instead of just using a disruptor pin to pass through the metal detector, we go into the safety deposit box room, retrieve our equipment in a closed viewing room, and then show the guard an appointment card for him to let us through. Now we see our first major divergence in the two versions. The PS1 level obviously elongated this opening sequence to turn it into a full level, but still ended on the confrontation with LeChase. The N64 version puts all of that extra fluff after the meeting with LeChase.
Your last chance. Give me a name. You still threaten me, even without your weapon?
So instead of just jumping out the window like we did in the PS1 version, which itself was emulating what happened in the film, we get an entire shootout segment where we kill our way through the upper floor of this bank and complete a series of objectives. You might be thinking to yourself that this looks a lot like how GoldenEye played, and you're right, it does play just like GoldenEye. In fact, I think it's fair to call this game the true sequel to GoldenEye even, since it feels exactly like it, just more convoluted and at times less fun. But it does feature a lot more gadgets to play with than GoldenEye had, like how we scrub the data from the cameras using a gadget, open a safe using a gadget, and crack a keypad using a gadget. And all of that is just in this first level. It's cool, I like it. Once all of that is done, we make our way down the stairs and out of the bank. Now, this is obviously a pretty major divergence from the movie since we don't jump out of the window, but at least it's fun. Oh yeah, and how about the Game Boy Color version? Well, you walk around a bank-like area, and then we find and confront LeChase, and then punch a couple guys, and oh look, we get a gun. Anyway. Back to the PS1 version, we get to pursue the assassin who killed LeChase and took a shot at King in the film. See, this level is really straightforward as we just run down a hyperlinear path killing enemies along the way. It's still fairly difficult because of the aiming, which I'll get to that in a minute, but we get plenty of unique guns to play with, which is nice. I also love the London backdrop in the distance too, though I question how all of these thugs got so many fully automatic weapons in the UK. Don't they know they need a license for that?
Well, a license is a license. Sorry, mate. Can't interfere.
Bloody hell.
All in all, though, this is the shortest level of the game. It's very quick to complete, and clearly spent more time trying to stun you with its visuals than it did on building out the length of the mission. Which, it does look great, admittedly. We ended off by using our grapple watch to latch us onto the hot air balloon's rope, so it's similar to the film which saw Bond just jumping up and grabbing the thing. Oh, and you have to actually shoot the physical rope because the hitbox is so small, which is annoying since I kept expecting the box outline to turn green when I was good to shoot, but it doesn't. So that must just be kind of an oversight. Things are pretty different over here on the Nintendo 64 version, however, as there is an extra mission for us to play before we can even get to this version's equivalent of that mission. Here, this extra mission is set in the MI6 headquarters right after the bomb goes off and kills King like in the film. It can be a little confusing though since both this level and the PS1 level we just looked at both share the name King's Ransom, but the N64 version of the PS1 King's Ransom level is actually called Thames Chase, which we'll get to that in a moment.
Something's not right about all this. King, the money!
First up, we have to fight off the horde of intruding soldiers as we try to find Sir Robert King, who, if you've seen the film, you already know is dead. I love this mission. It's got enemies coming in on grapple gear through windows, which requires the player to use Bond's clearance to shut the windows and keep them out by putting MI6 into lockdown. There's also some escort stuff here, but it's so easy that I think it's fine. We escort M from her office to the security center, and escort the doctor we saw in the movie from the medical bay to a different area to help some of the wounded personnel. Oh yeah, and I was playing through all of these sections on a USB Nintendo 64 controller for a more authentic experience. It still sucks to use, by the way, but at least it gave me something that felt close to the original intended gameplay. Aiming with this thing is terrible, and if I could have played this on the 1964 emulator to have a mouse and keyboard like I did for my coverage of GoldenEye, then I guarantee you I'd have had a significantly better time with it. Unfortunately, I couldn't get it to work, so here we are. This mission really does just feel like something from GoldenEye, but better. The weapons are punchier, the visuals are slicker and more detailed. It's an exceptional level that easily both plays just like something from GoldenEye while holding up against the best of that game's levels. Which is more than I can say for the Game Boy Color version, which just kinda has you wandering around the MI6 office shooting people. Once we're done fending off the intruders and securing MI6, Bond can begin his chase after the assassin, just like we saw in the movie.
Stop! Stop! It isn't finished!
The fact that we get a cutscene depicting the boat chase already gives this game a 1-up on its PS1 counterpart in my opinion. Speaking of, we're still not ready to move back over to the PS1 just yet, as we're only just now reaching the N64 game's version of the last PS1 level we saw. Although this version is significantly longer, as the map for this level is probably twice as big and easily took me twice as long to beat. Part of that is also just because it's way harder. I was definitely safe scumming my way through these games, but if I didn't, it would have taken me forever to beat them. So right away, you'll probably notice there's significantly more verticality here than the PS1 level had, along with much bigger layouts for its areas. I'd say this is actually just a common theme across these two versions. The Nintendo 64 version is just way bigger in general. It's got more levels, and each of these levels are usually twice the size of their PS1 counterparts. Oh yeah, and this version has a jump function where the PS1 version doesn't, and you're expected to use this jump function quite a bit, even though it didn't seem to work very well. Not to mention the watch functionality. So yeah, GoldenEye had a laser watch, but so does this version of The World Is Not Enough, along with a sleeping dart function, a stun function, and even a grapple function, which we frequently have to use throughout the levels to progress. How about that? Also, look at all the assets they made for this game. Just in this level alone, we've got an entire dock section complete with boats and running water. I don't think I can elaborate how impressive this is for an N64 game, even if it does need the expansion pack to run smoothly. So once we fight our way to the end of this mission, we're still not quite ready to move back over to the PS1 yet, because the N64 features yet another extra mission here exclusive to this version. So before we move on to that, let's take a quick look at how the Game Boy Color handled its take on this level. Okay, so we've got some piers, and that's kind of like the level, and wow, a lot of guys throwing some grenades. Alright, anyways, back to the N64 version.
Hold on, sir. This area is sealed off. We have a hostage situation.
I'm with MI6, let me through.
This level is called Underground Uprising, and like I mentioned before, it's another level unique to the Nintendo 64 iteration of the game. There were some liberties taken to add this level, as Bond takes a detour from his pursuit of the assassin to thwart a terrorist attack on a London subway where these guys, presumably under orders from the movie's villain, Renard, have taken hostages and planted a bomb. So our objective is simple enough. Fight our way through the subway, free the hostages, disarm the bomb, and kill every single terrorist we find. And look at how they've even got moving trains through the subway. This is insanely cool, and I feel like this game gets overlooked given how much it managed to accomplish here. Although the level itself is actually really short once you know what to do. It'll probably take you several replays to figure everything out, which makes it feel longer, but due to the 5-minute timer, the actual mission is only just around over 5 minutes long, even after disarming the bomb. Oh look, a train section. Yes, it's only a single non-moving car, but it's fighting guys on a train, so it still counts. Now, shockingly, even without knowing where the bomb was in this game, I found it in the literal first stall I checked. So I'd say my instincts are pretty spot on, and MI6 should reach out to me in real life immediately.
I'm ready for my 00 number.
With the bomb defused, which you have to actually do by tapping the disarm button without overdoing it and causing the thing to explode, we can finally fight our way up this stairway. I mean, grapple our way up these stairs. We can bust through the door, rush out into what looks like someone's backyard, and leap onto the hot air balloon, which catches us back up with where we left off on the PS1 version.
Tell me who's behind this. I can protect you.
Not from him!
So we're back and treated to another skiing section, but unlike the last Black Ops Entertainment skiing section, this one is unplayable and terrible. Seriously, this is so bad, and I'd have rather they just reused the exact skiing engine they'd already coded for Tomorrow Never Dies over this, because it's just not good at all. It's just moving around in first person like you'd expect, except your movement is so sluggish since you have to build up momentum to move, and it's horrendous to try controlling. How they released this level in this state is beyond me. The biggest problem isn't even the movement, it's just how much damage you take at all times since there's so many guards everywhere and you just die so quickly. I feel like this problem could have been solved by just cutting the number of enemies in half, because as it is, playing through this level borders on unplayable, because I'd wager at least a few people probably dropped the game outright by the time they got to this level. The skiing part isn't very long though. In fact, I think it's less than 60 seconds total, but you risk taking so much damage getting through it that it can wreck your chances of passing this ending part where you need to take out a dozen enemies along with multiple of these flying snowmobiles. And even then, I think I could abide it to a degree, except for the problem of aiming. As you might be able to tell just by looking at the screen, this game does not play very well. Auto-aim is off by default, which again makes it nearly unplayable given how bad the aiming is in this game, and honestly just PS1 shooters in general. But even with the auto-aim on, the targeting is so inconsistent with its range that it'll still make playing the game feel frustrating sometimes. The biggest problem, however, is the manual aiming. It's actually just straight up broken. I checked out some other footage of the game and didn't see this problem with anyone else's gameplay in this regard, so I'm pretty sure it's some kind of emulator issue on my end, but when you try to aim up or down, the game constantly tries to reset your aim back to center even while you're still in manual aim mode. And with so many enemies positioned above you like the ones on that pipe or the flying snowmobiles, you have to be able to aim up, and it just keeps jerking your aim back down suddenly, which caused me to waste so much ammo, miss shots, take damage, and otherwise just have a terrible time. Again, I'm pretty sure this was an issue with the emulator, but that's why you're seeing my footage do that, and I don't know why it's happening, and I couldn't make it stop. Anyways, once we finally take out the last flying snowmobile, we complete the mission. So, how does this measure up to the version we got on the N64? I mean, it's better, at least, but it's still rough to deal with the game's wacky aiming on the N64 controller. This level did take things back to basics and just put the whole thing on rails for the player, which is not only an improvement over the last level we just looked at, but also a fun vision of what GoldenEye might have looked like back when it was being developed as a rail shooter. So you can see what that may have been like just by playing this ski mission. I mean, how much can you really say about a short on-the-rails section like this beyond the fact that it's kinda cool? It definitely plays way better than the PS1 skiing mission, I'll say that much.
I think it would be better if I could aim literally at all, but this aftermarket USB controller has such a wildly sensitive joystick that makes such an endeavor feel literally impossible.
Elektra, it's alright. You're safe now.
Back to the PS1 version, we get the first of two missions that are exclusive to this iteration of the game that the N64 version offers no counterpart to, and one of the only things I even remembered about this game for the last 20-ish years of my life. Yeah, I did actually play this PS1 version at some point growing up, although I can't for the life of me remember when that might have been, as I don't remember owning it, so it must have either been at a friend's house or I just had a very short-lived ownership of this game at some point. But I do distinctly remember this mission because I was enthralled by a very specific element that I'm about to get to. First, to contextualize what's going on, this sequence takes place during the casino scene from the movie, obviously, where Bond is looking to find his old friend Zukovsky and question him about his involvement with Elektra King.
So you put your money where your mouth is.
It wasn't a super long scene, but it was very important. This mission is all about immersion though, and features absolutely no combat. It's all about feeling like Bond. In order to access Zukovsky's office, we first have to talk to this woman who admits that she's dating the guard to the door. And by doing this, we make the guard jealous and he comes over to speak with her, allowing us to use our credit card key, a gadget that I'll talk more about later, to enter the office. The mission doesn't end here though, as Zukovsky only agrees to share what he knows with us if we can earn $100,000 at his casino and then gives us $25K to play with. This brings us to that one element that I mentioned remembering so vividly earlier, a fully functioning blackjack minigame. This game is not only where I learned what blackjack was, but it's also where I even learned how to play blackjack at all, and I remember coming home to this game as a kid just to play this minigame, which in hindsight is probably terrible, and I hope this didn't predispose any kids to have gambling problems. I don't gamble myself at all, but I do recognize how serious of an issue it can be. Unless you're Togi. I do think it's cool that they have this feature in here to more fully flesh out that 007 experience, but damn. Maybe they shouldn't have made winning $100,000 of fake money an actual required objective to progress in the main game. That's pretty much the entire mission though. Once you win the required 100 grand, you go back to Zukovsky and move on to the next mission, Night Watch.
Shaken, not stirred.
This level sees Bond sneaking around the residence of Elektra King to gather intel, and starting us off right beside her sleeping character model is a point for accuracy as well. This is kind of an extra mile in my opinion, since the N64 game just starts you in an empty room by yourself. Oh yeah, all three iterations do actually feature a version of this mission, and all three are relatively similar to one another, which is really funny to me since the concept of this mission is based on a sequence from the movie that lasts like 2 minutes, I think. But I actually adore the Night Watch mission because it's a genuine attempt at a straight-up stealth mission across every version. So for the PS1 version, I do have to say that it's a little odd how the entire thing takes place inside of Elektra's mansion when the scene it's based on took place entirely outdoors. And I have to note that for later, but I do love that we're given Bond's credit card key, which did also make an appearance in the movie, so that's super cool. The tranquilizer gun is a nice touch too, I think. It's fun to shoot guards with tranq darts and adds to that stealth game feeling, but I do have to say that it's actually just an ineffective way to go about the mission, since the guards only stay knocked out for like maybe 10 seconds. And the same even goes for Bond's cell phone stun gun as well, whereas if you just punch them, they die and stay gone until you leave the area, so this is a much better way to go about it. I know I keep saying it by the way, but I just really love this art style. Wandering around these hallways in the pseudo-immersive sim PS1 game while we take photos of evidence, plant listening bugs on telephones, and unlock doors with our credit card key is so much fun to me, and I was loving this. They even added in these little environmental interactions that make noise to attract guards to them and further increase the game's stealth mechanics. It's not really very refined, but it's still so fun and way more in-depth than anything we've seen in a Bond game so far. However, much like all of this version's missions, the level itself is fairly small and doesn't take very long to complete. And given how this sequence in the movie actually takes place outside, it does make it stray further from being as accurate of an adaptation of the movie, since they had to turn Bond's confrontation with Davidov into a boss battle set in a garage to compensate for the lack of outdoor areas. And it's not even really a fun boss battle either. By the way, I'm pointing these things out to reinforce the contrast of the N64 version. So let's take a look at that. Now, there's only a handful of actual stealth games on the N64, so the competition isn't exactly challenging, but even so, this mission is probably some of the best stealth gameplay available on the console. First off, the vast majority of it takes place outside, like in the film, and the size of the level itself is easily double that of its PS1 counterpart. It's also way harder and took me way longer to beat. You've really got to pay attention to your objectives and make full use of nearly your entire arsenal to get through it stealthily. First off, if you get caught, it's mission over, so guns blazing is off the table, which means using your laser watch to burn off padlocks instead of shooting them. I think you can shoot them with your silenced Wolfram handgun, another made-up name to avoid invoking the copyright wrath of real-life arms manufacturers, but I think sometimes the guards can still hear this, although that may have been my paranoia. I know for sure they still hear silent shots in the PS1 version though. We don't have our tranq gun here either, but our watch is equipped with a tranquilizer dart function with a limited number of shots, which will not only be invaluable to our getting through this level, but also lasts much longer than the PS1 tranq gun did. So it's actually worth using. The stun function is basically useless though, and they get back up immediately, so don't even bother with that. And we can't get rid of them permanently by just knocking them out with our fists here either, so these tranq darts are all we have. There's a good use of gadgets here too, like using a data scrambler to shut down the security cameras across the property by breaking into these booths, of which there are two, one near the start of the level and one closer to the end. And both the phone bugging and photo taking objectives are part of this iteration as well, requiring you to stay undercover while still finding the different phones and evidence needed to complete them. Which is why the most useful of our gadgets this time around are the X-ray glasses. Seriously, these are going to be a must to get through the level without getting spotted. I'm telling you, it's actually a pretty good little stealth mission, all things considered. We don't have to deal with a boss battle at the end of this level either, thankfully, and are instead treated to a far more movie-accurate sequence of Bond hiding in the trunk of Davidov's car outside of the building near a security outpost like we saw in the film. This was easily one of the most memorable missions across all of the game's versions for me walking away from it all, partly because I love stealth games, but also because it's just impressive how much Eurocom managed to achieve with this N64 game. But what about the Game Boy Color version? Well, we're sneaking around in Elektra's mansion and we got caught. Anyway.
Interesting.
We can't jump back to the PS1 version yet either, as the N64 features another unique level here that has no PS1 counterpart called Midnight Departure. I'm mostly just showing the cutscenes from the Nintendo 64 version because the PS1 game just used actual clips from the movie for 90% of its cutscenes, so this is the only one with a lot of unique cinematics to actually show. Anyway, this is another of my favorite levels from any of the versions, and probably one of the best levels out of all of them too. It's another outdoor map, only it's actually massive. at least compared to any of the other levels in this game or the PS1 version. It's probably about twice the size of the surface map from GoldenEye for reference, and it's awesome. So our goal here is to kind of stalk Davidov to the airstrip where he's supposed to take a plane to Kazakhstan, and this is similar to where Bond killed him in the film too, except that happened right outside of the car in the movie. We also get some cool weapons to play with here too, like the crossbow and sniper rifle, which given the size of this map is actually useful. There's alarms the guards can set off to draw attention to your position, along with summoning a convoy to block off a bridge you have to cross, which does incentivize an attempt to play slightly more stealthily. Once we get to the airstrip itself, we have a small boss fight with Davidov before calling the plane in to land and collecting a bag of sneakers to bribe the pilots with.
Bond. James Bond. Now land that plane for me.
Okay, Flight 711, you're cleared for immediate landing, over.
Roger that, Control. We'll begin our landing at once. Over and out.
The boss fights in this game are mercifully easy though, since they're just NPCs with slightly more health to cut through, and I do like this better than how the PS1 version handled its boss fights, but we'll get there. With all of that done, Bond catches his flight and we head back over to catch up with the PS1 game, which conveniently just covers everything we just did by playing out the scene from the movie and sending Bond straight to Kazakhstan. The first half of this level is back to some M-Sim style gameplay as we make our way through this nuclear bunker and do some spy stuff. Although the N64 version is a better shooter, I do have to admit that this game does give you that feeling of being a spy far more. For example, these two guards won't let us pass them to get to where we need to go.
Sorry, sir. I cannot allow you to pass.
So in order to get past them, we have to shut off the power, which makes them leave their post to go turn it back on, allowing us to sneak by their position with our night vision goggles and use an access card we lifted off of a table in another room to open the door. Not to mention using Dr. Arkov's ID to gain access to certain areas like how Bond actually did in the film, and also the radiation badge to access other areas.
Sorry, Doctor. I cannot allow you to pass without a radiation badge.
Good afternoon, Dr. Arkov.
I feel like we didn't see very many things like this in video games back then. I mean, to be fair, this did launch 5 months after Deus Ex, but that wasn't available on the PS1, so this was still pretty special due to featuring these little immersive elements. Even if they are just minor gimmicks to pad the level, they do a lot to help immersion. The game turns back to shooting pretty quickly though, as once we enter the last room we get terrorists shooting not only at us but also Dr. Christmas Jones, who dies so easily that it nearly ruins all of the fun we just had. What was it that made developers think including NPCs that we have to keep alive or else the mission fails was a good idea? You're telling me Black Ops Entertainment scrapped their entire vision for Tomorrow Never Dies over the opinions of playtesters, but no playtester stopped them to suggest that this mechanic is awful and annoying? The rest of the level is just 2 rooms to fight through before we get our set piece with Renard telling Bond about the bomb.
No hard feelings, Mr. Bond, but we're even. Soon, you'll feel nothing at all.
Now, this game handles it by having us just grapple watch onto these chains and then riding them out like he did in the film, and then just ending the mission outright. And since it auto-equips the watch for you, I'd say all is well. This is fun, if a little bit undercooked. I do still like the level overall, but I think if I hadn't been abusing the save state feature on the emulator, then I would not have been having any fun having to restart repeatedly to keep Dr. Jones from dying. Back to the N64 counterpart, Eurocom did try to maintain some of the immersive elements of the PS1 game by having us equip an ID item and showing it to like 3 relevant NPCs, but that's about it. Otherwise, there's way less spy things involved in this level. I do think it's worth noting, however, that we start this level outside before meeting Dr. Jones and taking the elevator down into the bunker with her like in the movie. And the dialogue even tries way harder to resemble the film as well. I actually think the N64 version is a much closer experience to the film than the PS1 game is, if only for the little details like this. Dr. Jones and Bond even share their exchange of her doubting Bond's secret identity as Dr. Arkov and checking it out, whereas the PS1 version totally skips over all of this. Though since we spend so much less time doing spy stuff, that time is filled instead with shooting people, which gets set off right after a cutscene recreating Bond's confrontation with Renard.
There's no point in living if you can't feel alive.
Huh?
Drop the gun, now! There are too many new faces around here. Everyone to the cells.
You know what, while they're working all of this out, let's take a quick look at how the Game Boy Color version handled things. It opens outside like the N64 game does, but quickly has us entering the bunker where it kind of becomes a stealth-like game. We have to avoid detection while making our way through the bunker, or we get a game over. And look, we even get to press some buttons for some environmental interactivity. I'm gonna be honest with you, I didn't beat this game. I just used the password system to access every level and played some of each to get footage for them. This game is borderline abysmal. Oh, looks like they're done talking. Cool. So we have to use our grapple watch to get out of this pit and clear the area of Renard's men before pushing this cart through the tunnel to avoid taking damage while getting shot at, again, exactly like in the movie. Then we have a very similar confrontation with Renard in the elevator, also similar to the PS1 game, but let's talk about what's different. In both instances, you're given a short countdown sequence to escape before the bomb goes off, but for some reason, I just kept trying to outrun the explosion and escape the blast, when what you're supposed to do is jump into the air and ride this chain pulley down the tunnel like he does in the film. Which, in hindsight, I probably should have guessed based on the texturing of the bar being the same as the one used to indicate that the player can grapple watch onto things. Man, maybe my dumbass really does need that yellow paint after all. Anyway, the level doesn't actually even end here. You still have to fight through several more rooms of Renard's terrorist coalition alongside Dr. Jones until you can find the elevator for them to escape in.
So you're a British spy. Do you have a name?
The name's Bond. James Bond.
So finally we get another mission exclusive to the PS1 iteration of the game that the N64 has no counterpart to. And it's the second one of two, so that does make it particularly unique. This mission is called Flashpoint and takes place just before Bond and Dr. Jones enter the King pipeline to try and disable the supposed nuclear bomb currently in it. And it's kind of terrible. We're placed in a control room for the King pipeline, which has been taken over by Renard's terrorists who are now holding the staff hostage, which leaves us with the objective of going to each of the 3 individual control rooms and eliminating the terrorists while saving the hostages from execution. We're given this flashbang gadget, which does make it easier, but I didn't even think to use it at first, so I had to go through a couple of game overs due to a dead hostage. Also, now is a great time to talk about an enormous problem with this game that a lot of other older games also used to do, and I really don't like it. Infinite respawning enemies. Seriously, some of these environments are cool, and I think about how nice it would have been to just be able to kill all of the enemies and just look around the level and figure out the objectives once the area has been made safe. You know, like you would in real life. But the game just will not stop spawning enemies. Okay, so other than actually playing the game, everything is awesome. The gadgets, the environments, the visuals, the immersion, all of it is so cool. Anyway, the end of the level has Christmas Jones prepping the tunnel rig while we fend off way too many enemies to be reasonable. Pro tip, just don't move when this section starts. Stand completely still to prevent more enemies from spawning, and then just take out the ones who come out from that door on the second floor. With that done, we move on to the next level called City of Walkways. So we're back to a mission that exists in all 3 versions of the game, but as expected, they are strikingly different across each version. We do finally get some more exterior sections, unlike with a lot of the previous PS1 levels, and our first objective is to shoot down some helicopters with a missile launcher. None of these games feature any driving sections like the one we got in Tomorrow Never Dies, which does kind of feel like a step back in a way, but we do at least get to see Bond's car here and retrieve the aforementioned rocket launcher from its trunk. Oh, and I always bring up how much I love when games give me a P90, and this is no exception. I love this gun's design, and anytime a game includes it, I am thrilled. Unfortunately, it's not enough to save this mission from how terrible everything else is. Neither of the 2 main iterations of this game features any way to restore your health, and the best we get is you can sometimes find body armor that will tank a little damage for you. But the speed and ease with which you can lose your health is unbelievable, which makes the lack of any way to restore it considerably more frustrating. So all I'll say is this mission is exceedingly difficult, and because of the infinite enemies and rate at which they deal out damage, it's pretty much not even fair in some parts. I do really like that they bothered to include the helicopter with the saw blades all over it though, but it doesn't do very much beyond just shooting at you a lot, which makes the blades themselves feel almost pointless. Like, they're not the danger, the machine gun is. Also, there's plenty of enemies shooting at you and respawning infinitely. Like, why does the chopper need a machine gun too? It didn't have one in the movie. I feel like they only added it to make the level harder so that it seemed longer than it is. So in order to complete this level, we have to find and acquire the wrench item in this room, then head out and grab the flare gun from this building, and finally use the wrench to release some steam or something under the helicopter before shooting said steam with the flare gun, causing it to ignite. It's so obtuse and way harder than you'd think it would be, and if it wasn't so hard, then it'd be too short, because all of this is only like 4 areas across less than 10 rooms total. If you know what to do, the whole thing can be completed in like 5 minutes or less, and I was just frustrated because I was trying to figure out what to do while dealing with how many bullets were obliterating my HP. So how does all of this compare to the Nintendo 64 version? Well, I mean to level with you, this version is superior to the PS1 version in just about every conceivable way. First off, it's split into 2 separate levels fittingly called City of Walkways 1 and 2, but both parts separate are still larger than the PS1 level of the same name, and not by a little, but by a lot. Also, they're far more dynamic with more verticality, more weapons, and more advanced elements, like how these bridges move with physics as the helicopter chops them with its saw blades. Oh yeah, and these things are a menace in this version. First off, they drag these things all over in an attempt to kill you, which they can do by the way, and just like I brought up before, they can cut through the level in scripted events like cutting bridges up, even if you're walking on them, and straight up slicing chunks of buildings off. This iteration is a far more sophisticated take on this whole sequence. Even just by looking at it, you can see how much larger everything is in scale alone. I'm talking about it like it's all one level because despite being 2 separate missions, they understandably feel like one, but that itself is kind of one of my only criticisms. The first mission here is just Bond fighting his way through enemies across these different warehouses and piers. Beyond one sort of interesting room with a moving conveyor belt, there's not very much memorable about this level. I mean, the iconic saw blade helicopter itself doesn't even show up until the second part, and that one is where we see all of the more unique scripted sequences happen anyway.
Too bad we don't have any champagne.
So I honestly think the first part of these 2 levels could pretty much be totally removed and we wouldn't lose anything beyond a more barren level to kill bad guys in, which we've got plenty of already. So I just feel like that extra time could have been better spent somewhere else had that first part just been cut, and it would have also improved the pacing of the game too, in my opinion. I do very much prefer how this level ends on a kind of pseudo boss fight with the helicopter where we used remote controlled missiles to take it down, and this would have been way cooler if it were on mouse and keyboard so I could actually control the missiles half decently, but the idea here is still super cool. They took a page out of Half-Life's book from this one, clearly. The Game Boy Color version also has a level just like this, where we walk around inside of a warehouse for a while, solving our way through the maze of walkways, and it even ends on a boss battle against the helicopter too. This is one of the only missions I played enough of to see the end of the level, by the way. Don't be fooled into thinking I played a bunch of this version or anything. It is really so bad. I only actually played it for just over an hour total.
Now, where were we?
Here we have another example of a level where the PS1 iteration is just half the size and length of its N64 counterpart, which we'll get to, but in this case I do think the level is still kind of good overall. It's still very grounded, and what I mean by that is that everything feels so much heavier in this game. Whereas the N64 version feels more like a rendition on GoldenEye with more movement, leaning deeper into an arena-style-like vibe with bigger levels and so much more verticality, this game feels closer to a total conversion mod of Doom. Once you notice it, I feel like it's kind of hard to unsee how rectangular all of the walls are and how we're always moving on a flat surface. Also, we get another train segment, but this time through multiple cars and while the train is moving even. This is actually a full sequence too, with multiple different cars to fight through and some of the cheapest enemy placement you've ever seen. Seriously, hiding so many enemies right behind corners like this is diabolical. Not to compare it to Doom again, but like, come on.
It's too bad you're in such a hurry to catch me, Bond. I'd love to see you join the hundreds of people throughout the subway who will die once the sarin gas fills the ventilation.
So do you remember that level in the N64 version where we stopped a bunch of terrorists from destroying a subway with a bomb and how it felt kind of out of place? Well, this is this iteration's version of that idea, but done much smaller scale. We blow up this door using our explosive pen, fight our way through 2 hallways, find the bomb, and disable it by shooting these guard things off and hitting the bomb with our cell phone stunner. Figuring all of this out by having to replay missions over and over again probably resulted in so much frustration and played a huge role in how poor the game was received compared to GoldenEye and even its N64 counterpart. Anyway, once the bomb is disarmed, we head up the stairs to continue our pursuit of Bullion, which quite literally takes us around one corner before ending the mission. I mean, it's not bad, but it's not great either.
That's a GPS signal. It must be M, using the locator card from the bomb. The signal is coming from here.
Maiden's Tower. Bomb!
I've got to stop Bullion warning Renard.
You can probably already guess at this point, but this is a vastly superior take on this mission in almost every way. I say almost because there is a hidden timer that will auto-fail you for not completing the level in time, and that's incredibly frustrating since the level is interesting enough for me to want to stop and enjoy how everything looks and just take it all in. But otherwise, it's better in every way that I can think of. The buildings are much bigger, making everything feel like a real city as we chase Bullion through city streets, alleyways, in and out of buildings, and even jumping across rooftops and over balconies. Are you guys seeing this? They even littered the streets with vehicles and everything. I want to make it clear that I went into this with a bias towards the PS1 version, having played it as a kid, and I'm writing this script having to acknowledge this now as the objectively superior version. It's just really good and is 100% being held back by not having easy accessibility to mouse and keyboard gameplay. You can actually make it compatible with things like a mouse injector, but the potential for this game to be so much better is there. More on that later. As you expect, the ending is the same here once we find Bullion.
Drop your gun, or the lovely doctor dies. Zukovsky doesn't like to be double-crossed. I've got a new boss now. Miss King would like to see you.
Heading back over to the PS1 game, we see Elektra running off in the background as Bond gets up from the torture chair and gives chase. By this point, I kind of feel like the PS1 version of the game has already given us all of its best, to be honest. There's only 2 missions left between this one and the one after it, and neither of them are really all that fun. So for this level, it's kind of based around this staircase, with each floor opening up to an area filled with different things to accomplish. So we'll be running back and forth, in and out of doors, around these stairs like a Scooby-Doo chase scene. First, we enter into an area where Bullion is waiting for us in a room and have a small boss battle with him that I slash straight through by just firing off grenades into the room until he died. Then we grab Bullion's key, leave the area, go back to the stairs, ascend said stairs, use his key to unlock the door on the next floor up, clear out this area, find M who gives us a key card, go back down the stairs to the area we were just in, use said key card to open these locked doors and find the explosive pin we'll need to blow open her cell, go back to the stairs again, head back to M, use the explosive pin to free her, and protect her while she hacks the computer to unlock the top floor's doors so we can pursue Elektra.
I could have given you the world.
The world is not enough.
Gabor, kill him.
Here, we get another boss battle, this time against Elektra's top henchman, Gabor? And for some reason, he's basically a supervillain who can tank an innumerable amount of bullets. So the only way to do any serious damage to him is with explosives, and since I used up most of my grenades killing Bullion, I had to grab these pipe bombs that Gabor throws at you and throw them back at him before they exploded. I guess it is kind of cool that they tried to program in a proper boss battle here with an actual mechanic of grabbing these bombs and throwing them back at him like this, but it's just so clunky that I didn't find it all that fun. Anyways, with him dead, we head into the room with Elektra and just shoot her.
You wouldn't kill me. You'd miss me.
Die, Bond!
I never miss.
Alright, so if you're thinking that this game's take on this level is going to be better, then you're right, although it's significantly more obtuse as well. We do chase Elektra like in the other version, but this level is so much more elaborate and with more objectives to accomplish, like clearing out this underground area and retrieving this fingerprint scanner, for instance. We can't pursue Elektra up the tower until we scan Gabor's fingerprint, and he's currently hanging out down by the dock. Now, something I didn't realize about this area is that there's 2 paths to complete it if you've got a keen enough eye to find the alternative route. And this is something that later Bond games would execute on far better, but I just wasn't expecting it to find it here is the thing. Another M-Sim-light element, in a way. I feel like I'm going to frustrate a bunch of hardcore M-Sim fans by saying stuff like that, so let me just clarify. I'm not saying these games are immersive sims, I'm just saying that these little features to help aid immersion are appreciated, you know? Once again, the variety of the level's layout is remarkably better than the PS1, and the flow is just better overall in a pretty major way. Also, we've still got 2 boss battles here, one for Bolian and one for Gabor. We just get them in different places. It's fine though, since this game's boss battles are hardly noticeable. Like I said earlier, it's always just an NPC with slightly more HP than normal, which I kind of prefer for a game like this. Although I was caught off guard by this trap where Bond is closed into a hallway while gas slowly kills him. I just wasn't expecting it is all, but there's an area in the ceiling for you to grapple watch out of. And at the very least, the scene where we free M is a little bit closer to the film's version.
Sorry, Jane. I can't let you take Em away from me before I've finished with her. Put your weapons down, now. Finish him.
Now that's what I call a boss fight. I'm joking, obviously, but this was genuinely so much less annoying than the other one. Look, they even included the clock. That's dedication.
Put the gun away. You wouldn't kill me. You'd miss me.
Hey, let's check back in on the Game Boy Color version real quick. Oh, look, they threw in a little torture sequence minigame. That's charming. They did it like that part in Metal Gear Solid when Snake was being shocked and you had to mash circle to survive, except here you're mashing the A and B button to recover health while Elektra tightens the chair thing into the back of his neck. The rest of it is like you'd expect. Anyway, there's one more N64 exclusive level that we need to cover before we return to the PS1, and that's this level called A Sinking Feeling.
Welcome to my nuclear family.
Welcome to my nuclear family.
So I do have to give credit to the devs for managing to squeeze one more extra level into the game, and it's kind of a stealth mission at that, which is really cool, as if the alarm sounds, then the mission is over. But also, it's just so short, too. It's mostly one big room with a submarine in it, which, I mean, I guess that is cool, but I'm just saying there's not much more to say. It's a great excuse to use your X-ray glasses to see through walls and stuff, but you really do just kill like 6 guards total, I think, and then enter into the sub, so, I mean, it is cool that they bothered to model everything out for this one little sequence. Once we're in the sub, we fight through a few hallways, find Christmas Jones, escort her to the mine room, and then head deeper into the sub for the final mission of the game, which we'll get to here shortly, but first... This is the final mission and is called Meltdown across every iteration, although it varies in quality greatly across versions, and I honestly don't really like any of them. And it's hard to even say which one is the worst because they're all so bad in different ways. Probably the Game Boy Color version, but that's just because the whole game sucks. I don't even think I can say the PS1 level is shorter this time either, because I'm pretty sure it's actually longer. Also, I'm like 90% sure that these kinds of doors don't have locks that would open with a little key like that on a submarine. Feel free to correct me on that in the comments if I'm wrong about that, any submariners. The visuals, I do have to give it to them again. I mean, they're great, of course, and the very stiff, almost Doom but in concrete-like gameplay style is far better suited to an environment like this. Oh, and look, we even get to crawl through a vent. I legit forgot this game even had a crouch function until this point.
James, the reactor is going to melt down and it will go critical. You've got...
I didn't edit that. I promise you I didn't. That's literally just how it happens in the game. Bro straight up skedaddled. I didn't think about this before whenever I was covering Tomorrow Never Dies, and it only really occurred to me while writing the script for this game, but I think what's causing these cutscenes to cut off dialogue so early and why he ran like that is the unlocked frame rate of playing it on an emulator. I don't really know how to get into the details of exactly what's going on here, but I'm pretty sure playing this on an emulator with like an unlocked frame rate is allowing the game to run at a speed which forces the cutscenes to end earlier and run faster than they otherwise would in engine. We chase Renard through this tunnel and then through a room filled with radiation that we have to navigate using an actual radiation detector. This is the only time anything like this happens in the game, and there's nothing like this in the movie, so why they felt the need to program something like this is just so far beyond me. Anyway, we reach Renard, shoot some panels, and finally kill him. Then we have to sprint back through the area we came through trying not to die before reaching Christmas Jones and sparking the final cutscene, which in this case is just a clip from the movie. Oh, and they gave us another endgame screen, but this one is at least slightly better, although not by much. You won the game. You can now play all movies from the main menu. Good job, 007. How fun. But even all of that is not nearly as bad as what I had to endure in the final mission of the Nintendo 64 game. Stuck in a sunken submarine that is very much flooding around us, you will spend the overwhelming majority of this mission swimming around in this submarine looking for air pockets and trying not to die. Now, something I figured out pretty early on is that if you just follow the green lights, it'll take you straight through, but I didn't know that at first, and it's really easy to get turned around when you can barely remember which direction is which because of the omnidirectional movement here. In any normal functioning game, a mission like this would be no problem, but for some strange, unknown reason that I could not even begin to suggest an explanation for, you can only look around while underwater by stopping, holding the manual aim button to adjust your direction, and then continuing to swim. Now, there is a part of me that believes either something was wrong with my emulator or controller here, because there are buttons that let you look up and down while moving that would have made navigating this so much easier, but the second I went underwater, every time they just wouldn't work. I watched some other footage of this level and saw it was being played smoothly without stopping to manual aim, but I don't know if it was because he was playing with a mouse injector or something, because his footage was smooth as I've seen. And when I looked at other footage of the game, I saw other people doing the same thing that I was doing, having to stop in manual aim, so I don't know, I guess it doesn't matter, but all I do know is that trying to beat this level was bordering on rage-inducing. I lost so much health to not being able to move fast enough in between air pockets, so trying to stay alive once we get to the enemies at the end was just a nightmare. Fortunately, there's not very many, but it is shockingly easy to completely bypass the main villain Renard and find the exit without realizing it. And then think your game is glitched because Christmas just stands there not moving, and no message pops up telling you to go back and finish Renard or anything, so I legit just thought my game was glitched and had to look up what to do so I could be sure I hadn't missed something. Which I had actually missed something, so I headed back down, found the button we have to press to kill Renard, and then...
Oh! I feel nothing.
Same. Anyway, now we climb back up to where Christmas Jones is and enjoy our final cutscene.
I've always wanted to have Christmas in Turkey.
We love a happy ending, but let's head in and take one more look at how the Game Boy Color version handled things. Wow, this game is ass. Anyway, that's The World Is Not Enough for the Game Boy Color, the Nintendo 64, and for the Sony PlayStation.
See you back at the lodge.
So I know we kind of jumped back and forth a lot there to go through all three versions of this game, but honestly, I just found this to be such a remarkable opportunity to compare and contrast such wildly different experiences that all seem to share such similar packaging while varying so greatly in quality. The PS1 version is kind of like a novelty experience with a lot of fun and unique things that make it particularly special, but the Nintendo 64 version is actually just a good video game overall with more levels, all of which are better designed and typically far bigger. There's a lot of things I like about both versions, and a lot of things that I didn't like as well, and neither one is even close to being perfect. But there's quite a few redeeming aspects to find across the board here, I think, so let's look at a few upsides. The PS1 version is an extremely unique game that's been chocked full of novel sequences specifically to make each level feel distinct apart from one another so that every mission offers the player some new little thing that they can only find there. From turning a valve and shooting a flare gun to blow up a helicopter, to playing blackjack to stack 100k, the Black Ops Entertainment iteration of this game is really something special. But between the terrible aiming, chronically short level layouts, and overall lack of depth across its gameplay offerings, I think it ultimately falls short of feeling like any kind of complete or satisfying experience. The Nintendo 64 version features a far more comprehensive video game for players to sink their teeth into between its massive arsenal of gadgets and weapons to play with, impressive 14-mission single-player mode, each of which is far longer and better laid out than anything on the PS1, and overall better gameplay in general. This iteration seems to one-up its counterpart in pretty much every way. And that's not even factoring in the fact that this game also features an entire multiplayer mode to boot, so players at the time could happily invite their friends over for a brand new Bond experience if they'd gotten tired of GoldenEye but wanted something similar to play. And it's even got bots, which means that unlike GoldenEye, you could still play it just by yourself for fun, or even increase the challenge if you only had one or two friends over to play it with. It's really just no competition here. Despite my having had some bias towards the PS1 game going in, it's clear that the Nintendo 64 version is the superior game in just about every way. And the Game Boy Color version is a real video game that actually released.
I can't do that.
So this is the part where I talk about my hopes for a remaster. Like I said when talking about Tomorrow Never Dies, pitching remasters was going to be a reoccurring element in my coverage for these Bond games. So the obvious question is, which version do I think they should remaster and port to the PC? Which of these games deserves to be revitalized, given a chance with new players, and optimized with better controls and improved quality of life elements? Well, the Nintendo 64 version is the obvious answer here. Even putting aside the obvious selling point of the multiplayer alone, it's got the most missions and the better versions of the missions shared between it and its PS1 counterpart, along with the strongest potential of becoming that much better of a game with improved controls and the opportunity of new life. With that said, however, my preference would actually be for both games to be combined into one remaster package and sold together with a little menu that lets you select which version you wanted to play. Although, I think all I'd want to see done to the PS1 version is for it to be made fully compatible with mouse and keyboard natively, and then just given a decent port, and that's it. That alone would turn it into a 2-hour experience at the most for the average gamer, so the overall value is just less with this one, but it's so novel that I would still love to see it included as like a bonus campaign. The N64 version, on the other hand, is actually a legitimately great experience with massive potential to be even better with some minor fixes to a few things and a proper port. I guess you can throw the GBC game in there too if it's convenient and no trouble at all. So for the past 2 Bond games I've covered, I've offered some extensive praise for the notably exceptional music of their original soundtracks. And for this one, we've got 2 really solid entries to look over. Although I need to be real with you for a second about the fact that I think both of these are just simply okay. Let's start with the PS1 soundtrack first. It's pretty good. It's got a similar groove-oriented vibe to the Tomorrow Never Dies OST, and all of the elements are present to make a great score too. We've got strings, brass, synth, I mean, it's all here. Don Vecca handled all of the music for the PS1 version, and he's actually gone on to do audio work for some really popular games since this too, including another Bond game, and even more recently the reboot of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. But here's the thing. All of these tracks are good, but they lack that oomph factor of the previous 2 Bond soundtracks I've looked at. Although they do get close. The synths, strings, and other elements are there, the Bond leitmotif is almost always present, and they're all, at the very least, punchy. Now, unfortunately, I have to be a little bit harder on the N64 soundtrack, which is considerably worse, relatively speaking. From what I could find in doing some research, and I did actually have to do a little digging to find these composers, this soundtrack was handled by Neil Baldwin, a founding member of Eurocom and an on-staff composer for them when they were around. Now, some of these tracks are really great, especially given what the N64 was even capable of handling. But the score overall just doesn't really measure up very well to its Bond soundtrack peers. It always tears me apart to be critical of things like this because I know how much work goes into making these kinds of things, but to be honest with you, the vast majority of these tracks feature a large degree of repetitive, minimalist elements that do set a great tone for each level, but fail to deliver a dynamic auditory experience that makes a lasting impact on the player's mind, i.e., they're not very memorable or iconic. Although with that said, these tracks still do a phenomenal job of setting that atmosphere for each level, and I appreciate them for that as well. Also, Peter Korex did the score for the Game Boy Color version, and it's about as good as I feel you could hope for a Game Boy Color soundtrack to be, I guess. I think there's a little something for everyone in this big mishmash of secret agent spy game media. But mostly if you're already a 007 fan, and I say that with something of a negative connotation. See, with something like GoldenEye, there's a sort of mass appeal to playing it due to its enormous cultural relevance, history, and influence on the medium. But when it comes to these games, well, I mean, they typically wind up as a footnote in GoldenEye's shadow. And it's not just because of the negative aspects I talked about earlier, but also because their lack of offering a concise and consistently enjoyable gameplay experience makes their main appeal become that they're a way to play through a Bond movie. And while that's awesome to someone like me who's a big Bond fan, it's not nearly enough of a selling point to someone who's more indifferent on the character,
and doubly so when you factor in that despite The World Is Not Enough being one of my personal favorite Bond movies, my understanding is that it's typically not even making top 10 for the average Bond fan. And so, while I really hope that someday we'll see a rollout of some genuine high-quality James Bond remakes, for now, I don't know how much I could recommend any of these specific 007 experiences to the average consumer. Hey, yes, I know my voice was kind of fried for a lot of this video, but I hope you still enjoyed it anyway. If you did, then I'd ask you to consider hitting the like button, subscribing to the channel, and leaving a comment to boost the video in the algorithm. If you're a Bond fan, or even just someone who was never interested in the series but has since been enjoying learning more about them, then you're going to want to stick around because I'm going through all of the Bond games leading up to IO Interactive's 007 First Light, which I plan to review. If you want even more Bond-related content from me, well then I've been doing movie reviews of the 007 films and posting them for channel members and over on my Patreon, along with other exclusive content like Star Wars book reviews, production update videos, and more. So thanks again for watching, by the way, and I hope I'll see you in the next video, but until then, that's all I've got for you.